Welcome to Rialto Channel podcast. I'm Francesca Rudkin and my guest today is Paul Conroy. Photojournalist and author Paul Conroy worked alongside Marie Colvin, the formidable American war correspondent who wrote for the Sunday Times. In 2012, Marie and Paul were in Homs, Syria, where their media hideout was targeted and shelled by the regime. Marie lost her life and Paul received a serious leg injury. The documentary, Under the Wire, takes us through the days leading up to the attack and after it. It's a gripping and gritty tale. Paul, thanks so much for being with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having us.
It is an incredible tale, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I look back, I saw the film the other week. I was doing a screen and I kind of look back at it now and think, what were we thinking?
I mean, that's interesting. And do you only feel that now, or did you think that when you were recovering from your leg injury?
No, it's more now, really. At the time it's happening, it was a descent. It went from bad to worse to worse to worse. But at the time, it just seemed it was a progression that we just dealt with. We had to deal with as it was happening. And it was only really when the film came out and I sat and watched the final edit. I'd worked on it, but I hadn't seen the final cut. It was when I saw the final edit, it was for the first time I realised, how other people see the story and how other people saw us. It's not very often you get to see that. But seeing it in the final edit, it was a strange feeling of like, wow, what were we thinking? But at the time, it just seemed, it was a natural thing for us to do.
The footage that we see in this film, I mean, obviously a lot of it has been used already in the news and things, but I imagine that this is the first time we've seen all this footage together to tell the story.
Yeah. I mean, it took us nearly 4 years to track down. A lot of the footage I shot on a flip cam I used to carry with me, and I'd shoot other stuff apart from the stills that I was actually primarily doing. So I shot a lot of the footage, but at the time that we were there, all the other press had left. So we were the last two Western journalists in Homs, certainly in Bab al-Amra, and all the time we were working, they were filming us working. So we knew the footage was there, but it took such a long time to get people, into Syria to retrieve the footage, track it down, who had it. It was spread all around the world, really. So by the time it was all put together, it was an eye-opener. I hadn't seen a lot of the footage until I saw the film. Certainly the stuff the rebels shot of me and Marie working I'd never seen before, and after the explosion, that was all new to me.
So Paul, how easy, this sounds like it must have been, you said it took 4 years, obviously a really difficult job then, to get all that footage.
Yeah, I mean, it was so. I mean, I wrote the book first, so I was sealed off in my own little world while I wrote. I was in hospital for 6 months, I think, and I started writing when I came out of hospital. Then 6 months to write the book, and then the producers read it and thought, we want to make this into a film. What footage have you got? So I gave them that, but then I was like, well, there's other guys, so I gave them names. Some of the guys were dead by then. So it was just a long process of word of mouth. There's somebody in Jordan with some footage with 5 minutes. So the director would fly to Jordan, then he'd fly to Istanbul and then Amman. Just tracking down. And we were quite specific of only using footage that was shot at the time that me and Marie were in Homs. So it wasn't kind of library, generic YouTube footage. Every single piece of footage used was shot while we were there, or was footage of us while we were there. So it was a mountain, really. That was the main job in the documentary, was piecing together all of this footage.
No, I hadn't realised that. I just sort of presumed, actually, that most of the footage was yours. But it works so well because the lead up and also what happens after the attack. I mean, it's very tense. Tell me a little bit about how you felt immediately after the attack. I know there was a little bit of self-diagnosis going on. What was running through your head at that point?
Well, I mean, in the minutes following the attack, I found Marie in the rubble, and Remy Oshlik also was killed, and I confirmed they were dead. And I was kind of also trying to fix me. I had a huge hole blasted through the back of my leg, so I was trying to fix my leg up. But in them moments after, when I realised Marie was killed, I was astonished at myself, because I couldn't feel anything. I was just completely numb physically with the adrenaline and trying to deal with the pain, but also emotionally, it was strange, and I felt awful because it was so matter of fact. I was laying in the rubble. They continued to attack, and in that moments I was saying I should feel something. I was disturbed. I felt nothing. Doctors have since said, that is the classic case of shock. A physical shock. But I then had kind of nearly 6 days to make sense of what was happening. And in them 6 days, we were being hunted. Then they were continued to attack, trying to kill us. But I was just determined. I think I put it rather unsmoothly in the film. I wasn't going to die in a pool of my own blood in that hellhole. So I always had half of my mind was devoted to keeping the pain at bay, because there were no painkillers really. It was just these massive injuries, and the other half was like making plans to escape there somehow. So I think I was on plan W by the time we did actually escape.
Yeah, I mean it's. And the other thing that, when I was watching the film, I kept thinking at that moment was, you'd been in Homs, you'd been to the hospitals, you knew the shortages, you knew how much shelling was going on. I mean, it was just it was going to be such a tough road to get out. And I was just, wondering if that was what was going through your head. You almost knew a bit too much.
Yeah, I knew that was the thing. I knew the journey in that we'd have to do reverse to escape. I knew that the doctors had no painkillers. They had no real, when it came to fixing my leg, they'd run out of stitches. A fist-sized hole going through it, and they had to use a staple gun to actually just staple the hole up and try and keep my leg on. So all of this was like, oh my God, even if I live, the journey out and the treatment, I know they'll do the best, but they have limited everything. So it was just this wall thing, and it took us 3 days to get in, and I knew I had to do that journey in reverse, only kind of seriously injured. So it was all it was more psychological and a physical battle to keep the pain at bay, but also have the just knowing that the endurance I was going to need to go to do the reverse journey.
Paul, that experience in Syria, has it changed the way you do your job?
Well, I mean, I haven't been back on the actual front line since then. I have been back. I did sneak into Syria earlier in the year to do some work there, and I got into Yemen and Libya as well this year. But it's kind of it's given me a big period of reflection really, and I think you saw it in the tunnel when I was escaping. They said get out and tell the world, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do since I got out. Is to tell their story. That's what we went in to do, to tell their story. So I guess now I'm far more of an advocate for justice in Syria and accountability, and it's still happening. So I still feel the need to keep telling the story of what happened in Syria in order to try and keep the world focused on it. The danger is it just slip off the news cliff of death, and that's not what anybody needs at the moment.
No. What do you think of the situation in Syria, the current situation?
It's, to be honest, I know I'm in touch with people on the ground regularly, and it's as bad now as it ever was when we were in Homs. What's happening in Idlib at the moment, there are 3 million people surrounded. They're being ruled by the jihadists. They're in Idlib, and they've got the Syrian army and the Russian army bombing them at the moment. So it's such an effort to keep that story alive. I think we may yet have the worst to come. Is the really horrible vision that I have. There is worse to come.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I watch the documentary, I keep thinking to myself, this was 2012 when this happened, when you started to bear witness to the atrocities that were happening to civilians in Homs in Syria. And I'm sitting here in 2019 and we just think of it as, it's still going on, day-to-day life, It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, none of us who were involved in Syria, all the journalists I know, and people who were there when Marie was killed, not a single one of us ever had the thought that we'd be sitting here, 7-8 years later, talking about it as an ongoing event. We thought we might be talking about it as a past term historical event, but none of us, for the life of us, thought we'd still be talking about it as an ongoing event. It's absolutely shocking.
I think Marie would be very proud of the film and the book that you've written and the role that you are playing in keeping it in people's awareness.
Yeah, I hope so, because she's been, part of my motivation all along. From the moment I woke up after the meet, I had 23 operations when I got back to try and put me all back together. But I remember waking up after the first one and just had this this voice on my shoulder go, what the hell are you doing laying there? Do something. and I think she's been with me ever since. Every time I start slacking or doing not as much as I feel I should, up she pops, and it's like, okay, Marie, I'll get on with it. So yeah, I really hope she's proud. I hope so after all this effort.
She was an extraordinary woman, but she did struggle to get along with her photographers. How come you two clicked?
I think it's to do with our meeting back in 2003. I'd never met Marie till then, and I was in Syria actually, just before the last Gulf War, and I got so bored waiting for the Syrian secret police to allow us to sneak across the Tigris River into Iraq. You needed their permission to take this little dodgy boat at night. That I built my own boat out of lorry inner tubes, and
how did that go?
I built it in my hotel room. I was a lot of inner tubes and planks of wood and bits of rope, and it was like a raft that I deflated and sneaked to the border with me in my translator's car at midnight. And as I was inflating it to sail into Iraq, the army ambushed me and arrested me, and weren't too nice to me. But they did let me go. And but none of the other journalists would talk to me because they're like, you've spoiled our war, that kind of approach. But Marie walked into the bar that night and opened the door, and she just went, who and where is the boatman? And I rather meekly put my hand up, and she came across and she just went, boatman Marie Colvin, Sunday Times, I love your story, can I buy you a drink? And I was like, oh yes please. And that was it. That's how we met. And, we spent the rest of the night up with a bottle of scotch, telling each other our greatest little exploits of getting into war zones. And, I think that's the foundation for everything we did. She just loved it, and she was telling me stories about how she was going to sail in a dinghy from Gaza, Israel to Gaza. And, when we finally worked together, it just worked magic. But she was notoriously bad with photographers. I think in the film there's a great part where the foreign editor says that one photographer she wouldn't work with because he was too metrosexual, and the other one said she was scarier than the war he was meant to be covering. so sums Marie up nicely actually. The metrosexual thing, I think it's because he washed and combed his hair or something like that.
Oh, well, look, in amongst the horrors of war that we get to see in this film, there are some delightful tales, and it's wonderful to see her on screen again. So thank you so much for your time today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much for having me.
Thanks, Paul. You can catch Under the Wire on Rialto channel on the 5th of December.